Have you ever been to a funeral and felt something you couldn't explain? Not just grief, but something deeper. Something that made your heart race in the middle of all that stillness? Let me ask you this. What would you do if you showed up to say goodbye to two people you've known your whole life, and instead, you uncovered a truth so raw, so intimate, that it left you completely changed? Would you run from it, or face it head on? Hey, before we begin, pause for a second and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Just drop your city, your country, your little corner of the world. I really want to know who's out there listening to stories like this. And while you're here, do me a favor. If you love these kinds of emotionally complicated, morally tangled stories, type 1 in the comments. But if you're not into it, and you think I should switch it up and tell something different, that's okay too. Just type 0, so I know what kind of stories you want more of. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This is Mr. Alex Stories, where we don't just tell stories, we dig into the ones that make your chest tighten and your thoughts spin. Now, when I arrived at the funeral home that morning, I thought it would be just another quiet goodbye. The sky was the color of wet concrete, and the air had that thick, heavy stillness that clings to your clothes and your skin, the kind of day that tells you nothing happy is going to happen. Inside the small white church, people whispered in soft voices, old family friends, neighbors I hadn't seen in years, cousins I used to share ice cream with as a kid. And then, there was Ethan, the son. He stood near the caskets, tall, composed, eyes locked on the floor. He wasn't crying, but his silence was louder than anyone else's grief. I'd known Ethan my whole life, but that day, something in him felt different, like he was carrying a secret no one else could see. And I had no idea just how much that secret was about to pull both of us into something we could never unfeel. Let me tell you what really happened, and why no one could believe what Ethan did next. Not even me. After the service ended, most people filtered out slowly, one car at a time, headlights glowing faintly through the drizzle. But I stayed behind, partly to help, partly because I didn't know how to leave just yet. There was this heaviness in the air that made every movement feel slow, like walking through water. Ethan was still there, standing near the memorial table that held a framed photo of his parents on their wedding day. He looked lost. Not the kind of lost where you don't know where you're going, the kind where you know exactly where you are, and it just doesn't feel like home anymore. I should go through some of their old things tonight, he said, almost to himself. There's stuff we need for the burial tomorrow. Photos. Maybe some of Mom's favorite flowers. I offered to help. He didn't argue. Back at his house, his parents' house really, everything still smelled like them. Lavender and wood polish, soft notes of old books and warm blankets. It hadn't been touched. You could feel that. No one had dared to change anything. We sat cross-legged on the living room floor, flipping through old photo albums, the kind with sticky pages and yellowing edges. There was one of us, back when we were maybe 9 or 10, both sunburnt and soaked from the lake. I laughed. Remember that summer at the lake house, when you dared me to eat a worm? He chuckled, really chuckled, and for a second, the weight on his face cracked just enough to let some light in. Yeah, he smiled. You screamed like you'd been stabbed. We kept flipping pages, more memories, more moments frozen in time. A photo of his mom braiding my hair, his dad grilling on that tiny rusted barbecue. The kind of life that felt so permanent back then, like it would always be there. At some point, he stood up and came back with 2 mugs of tea, his mom's favorite chamomile blend. He handed me one and sat down beside me, not too close, but not far either. I know you didn't have to come today, he said quietly, but I'm really glad you did. I didn't answer right away. I just nodded, and for a long time, we sat in silence. Not awkward silence, the kind that wraps around you like a warm quilt, soft, still, full of unspoken understanding. Then we found an old home video. We played it on the old DVD player in the den, and the screen flickered to life. Shaky footage, slightly overexposed. Ethan's dad was filming. His mom was trying to teach us how to make pancakes. We were failing miserably. Batter was everywhere. At one point, I tripped and knocked over a mixing bowl. Little Ethan shouted off camera, "You're ruining breakfast!" We both burst out laughing. Not polite laughter, Real belly-deep laughter that cracked something open, something innocent. He paused the video and looked down. Then he whispered, "I didn't just lose my parents. I lost the only people who still believed in me, no matter how badly I messed up." His voice broke a little on that last part. And I felt that. Because when you're grieving, it's not just the people you lose. It's the version of yourself that only existed in their eyes. The part of you that felt safe and loved and seen. Evening fell slow and soft. The rain had stopped, but the sky stayed that deep, velvety gray. Ethan offered to cook something simple, just grilled cheese and tomato soup. We sat at his parents' old dining table. No music, no distractions, just the clink of spoons and the quiet hum of the fridge in the background. It was gentle. It was safe. He kept asking how I'd been, what I'd been up to all these years. But every time I answered, he looked at me like he already knew. Like he remembered pieces of me I'd forgotten. I didn't know it then. But that night was the beginning. Not of something physical, but of something felt. Something that neither of us had asked for, and yet neither of us could fully turn away from. After we finished eating, I offered to take the dishes, but Ethan shook his head gently. "I got it," he said. "You've done enough." I watched as he moved around the kitchen, not rushed, not distracted. Every motion was slow, deliberate. He washed each plate with care, like it meant something more than just cleaning up after dinner. Like he needed the stillness of it to stay grounded. But then, there was this moment. He looked over his shoulder, just briefly, and our eyes met. Not in that casual, forgettable way people look at each other in passing. This was different. It lingered. Like he wanted me to see something he wasn't ready to say. I dropped my gaze first, felt my stomach twist. Not from nerves exactly, but from something else, something quiet and unsettled. It was probably nothing, I told myself. Just a long day, just emotions, just grief. But the way he looked at me, it made something stir. Something I didn't have a name for. Later, we ended up back in the living room. The rain had picked up again, soft, steady. The kind that makes you feel like the world is folding inward, gently. We curled up on opposite sides of the couch, a thick blanket across both our laps. The home video was still playing. Ethan's mom laughing off camera, his dad making bad puns, us running through a sprinkler like wild things with no thought of tomorrow. At one point, Ethan reached for the remote at the same time I did. His hand brushed mine, just for a second. But he didn't move it. He didn't flinch or pull away like people usually do when they touch by accident. His fingers just stayed there. And neither did I. It was such a small thing. Insignificant to anyone else. But to me, it felt like a thread pulled too tightly. My breath caught for half a second and I looked at him. He wasn't looking back. He was staring at the screen. But there was this stillness in him, like he was waiting for something unspoken to pass between us. I pulled my hand away, smoothed the edge of the blanket, laughed softly, pretending I hadn't noticed. But inside I felt this tightness in my chest. Not fear, not excitement. It was something in between, something dangerous because it was quiet, because it didn't announce itself, it waited. We didn't talk much after that. The video ended. He yawned, said he was turning in for the night. I followed his lead, said goodnight, walked down the hallway to the guest room, the one his mom used to keep ready for me during summer visits. It still smelled like her hand lotion, lavender and orange peel. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Why am I noticing this? Why did that moment feel like more than it should have? This wasn't the time. It wasn't the place. We were here to say goodbye, to grieve, to hold space for two lives that had just vanished. But the way my skin remembered the shape of his fingers, the way my heart had picked up pace when our hands touched, I couldn't ignore it. I lay down fully clothed, staring up at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. Outside, the rain whispered against the window pane. Inside, I tried to bury the feeling. Tried to call it exhaustion, or nostalgia, or misplaced comfort. But deep down, something else whispered back. What if you're not imagining it? What if he felt it too? And worse, what if part of you wants him to? The storm outside wasn't just loud. It was like nature was throwing its own tantrum, a primal sound that rattled the windows and shook the air itself. Rain came down in sheets, tapping against the glass like 1,000 desperate fingers begging for attention. The power flickered for a moment. The lights buzzed out and then back in, dimmer now, as if the world itself was holding its breath. It was the kind of night that made everything feel quieter, more still. It was only then that we thought to light the candles. There was no need to say much. Ethan and I moved through the motions without a word, grabbing matches, setting the flames to life, watching the little flames dance as though they could fill the silence for us. We sat together on the couch, wrapped in blankets, not close enough to touch, but enough for the warmth to linger in the air between us. The flickering candlelight made the shadows in the room twist, stretch, as though they were reaching for something just out of sight. The storm raged outside, but the house, it was electric, that charged stillness that settles between two people when the world around them goes quiet enough to hear their own hearts. Ethan's voice was softer now. When he spoke, it felt like it had weight, a weight that sank into my chest, pulling me lower into the tension between us. "You were always different," he said, his gaze focused on the candle flame, as though it held every thought he was unwilling to say outright. Even back then, I noticed. I felt something tighten in my chest. His words, they weren't an observation. They weren't just a comment on the past. They were a confession. But they weren't the kind of confession you expect to hear, not the kind you prepare for. I looked away from him, feeling the heat crawl up my neck. I didn't want to hear it. Not now. Not here. In this room, with the world collapsing outside. But did I really not want to hear it? Did I really want him to stop? I whispered, barely audible. "Don't." It was a warning, but it wasn't clear if I was warning him or warning myself. My voice trembled, betraying me. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't need to. He just sat there, staring at me with those deep eyes. Eyes that had known me too long. Eyes that had once been the kind you could lose yourself in. But now they felt different. Heavy with something unspoken. The thunder rumbled again. It was the kind of sound that vibrated the air, deep and unsettling. And yet, despite the roar of the storm, despite the chaos outside, inside, it was unnervingly still. We didn't move. We didn't speak. That moment, that suffocating, electric moment, it felt like everything was happening all at once. Everything we were not saying was louder than the storm itself. Ethan shifted slightly in his seat, but he didn't come closer. His fingers, resting loosely on his knee, twitched for just a second. But he didn't reach out. Neither did I. What would I even do if he did? The thought flickered through my mind, and I crushed it down as quickly as it came. I couldn't think about that. Not now. Not here. And yet, every inch of me was aware of him in ways I had never been before. Every sound, the rain, the thunder, the flickering of candlelight, seemed to pulse with a kind of tension, a kind of pull that neither of us could ignore. I wanted to leave. I wanted to stand up and walk out of that room, pretend that nothing had changed, but I didn't. I couldn't. The air between us was too thick, too heavy. It was like the storm outside had become the storm inside. I looked at him again, and for a moment, the world outside disappeared. It was just us. The candlelight flickered between us, the shadows of our past dancing on the walls, growing taller, sharper, more real. And then, his voice again. So many times I've wanted to say it, but never could. The words hung between us, so raw, so full of meaning that neither of us dared to touch them. My breath caught. I should have said something. I should have pulled away, said no, told him this wasn't the time, this wasn't the place. But I didn't. In that moment, the silence said too much. But neither of us was brave enough to speak. We both sat there, listening to the storm, feeling the unspoken words twist and turn, filling the space between us. It was as though we were waiting for the other to make the first move, to break the tension, but neither of us did. And the longer we stayed like that, the more I realized that some things, some emotions are never really said. They just hang there, in the air, waiting, and in that silence, we both knew that whatever came next would change everything. The next morning, I woke up early, too early, before the light had fully claimed the sky. The world outside the window was still wrapped in gray, and the silence of the house felt oppressive. I could hear the steady rhythm of Ethan moving around downstairs, probably making coffee, getting ready for another day of handling things just like the day before. But I couldn't face him yet, not after everything that had passed between us the night before. Not after that moment. I pulled myself out of bed slowly, too slowly. The heavy feeling in my chest had settled deeper now. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. It was a quiet, aching confusion. I moved around the room, packing my suitcase with deliberate slowness. Every item I folded, every zipper I pulled closed, felt like a small but necessary action. Something to give me control. Something to fill the silence. Something to distance me from the chaos that was swirling inside. I couldn't stop thinking about last night, the way the room had felt so full, of words, of emotions, of tension, and yet so empty too. Empty of clarity, empty of right and wrong. Because nothing about this felt right anymore. I glanced at the door. I could hear him downstairs, but he didn't come up. Maybe he didn't want to face me either, or maybe, just maybe, he was waiting for me to break the silence. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. It wasn't mine to break. I walked past the window, pulling the curtains aside just enough to see Ethan standing by the gravesite later that morning. Alone. His posture was defeated. The rain had started again, soft but constant. He looked so small standing there, as though the weight of everything had crushed him into the earth. It was the kind of brokenness that only grief could create. Raw, undiluted. My heart twisted at the sight of him, but I didn't move. I stayed hidden behind the trees. I knew better than to approach now. This wasn't my moment. This wasn't my place to comfort him. Not when I could barely comfort myself. What am I doing? I wondered. What are we doing? I was a guest in his home, a childhood friend, a visitor in a time of mourning, yet here I was, feeling this. These feelings that had no place in this story. This isn't mine to feel, I told myself, over and over. This isn't a story that should happen. But the truth was, it was happening. It was happening right there in that quiet little house. And I was a part of it whether I wanted to be or not. The rest of the day passed in a blur of avoidance. I stayed out of Ethan's way. I kept my eyes lowered. I spoke only when necessary, keeping my responses short, polite. The silence between us grew thick, almost suffocating. But it was better this way. Better than giving in to something I didn't understand. He didn't press me for answers. He didn't ask about my sudden distance, but I could feel it. He noticed. And every time our eyes almost met, I quickly found something else to do. A drawer to close, a corner to straighten, anything to avoid that gaze. But it didn't escape me. The way he watched me, the way his eyes followed my every movement, quietly, intently, as if waiting for something from me. And I couldn't give it to him. I couldn't let myself. What if he knows? I thought. What if he feels it too? But no words passed between us. And for that, I was grateful. Because there was no easy way to explain this. That night, the rain returned with a vengeance. The sound of it against the roof, against the windows, was a constant hum, a reminder of the world outside, a world I didn't feel part of anymore. I had packed most of my things, and I planned to leave first thing in the morning. It was for the best, I told myself. I needed distance. I needed space. But when I heard the knock on my door, my heart dropped. I didn't need to open it to know who it was. I knew. I knew the knock too well. The tentative, almost hesitant sound, like he wasn't sure if he should disturb the quiet. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. But when I finally opened the door, there he was, Ethan, standing in the hallway just out of reach. He looked tired, exhausted even, but his eyes were still as clear as ever, and they were locked onto mine. He began, and his voice cracked slightly, but he didn't let it stop him. I need to say something, even if it ruins everything. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, waiting, my heart pounding in my chest. I was terrified. Terrified of what he might say. Terrified of how I would respond. He stepped forward, closing the gap between us just enough to make the air feel thick with tension. "You were the only one who made it bearable," he continued, his voice soft but urgent. "The only one who saw me, really saw me. I think about you more than I should." I couldn't breathe. Those words, those damn words, hung in the air like a challenge. My chest tightened, and I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions at bay. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just looked at him. "I know it's wrong," he added, almost in a whisper. "But my heart, it answers before my mind does. I think about you, and I can't stop it. I can't ignore it." I stayed silent. I wasn't sure I could trust my voice anymore. "My heart answered, but my lips couldn't," he said softly. "I should have said something sooner, but now it's too late." The silence between us stretched, stretching and stretching, becoming its own confession, one that neither of us could take back. And yet, we both stood there, frozen, waiting for the other to speak, to say something, anything. But neither of us did. At dawn, the house was still too quiet. The kind of quiet that lingers in the air after a storm, when everything feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to change. I woke up earlier than I expected, my eyes heavy from lack of sleep, my body aching from the tension of everything that had been unsaid. Ethan was still asleep downstairs, or maybe he wasn't, maybe he was just pretending to be. But I couldn't stay in this house any longer. I couldn't face him after everything we'd shared, after everything that had almost been said. There was no way forward for either of us. Not like this. I quietly gathered my things, taking the few belongings I had left scattered around the room, things that felt too familiar now, too tied to a past that I didn't know if I could return to. Every movement felt deliberate, like I was moving through a haze trying to clear the fog from my own mind. I didn't want to leave like this. I didn't want to be the one to run away, but I knew I had no choice. There was nothing left for me here. As I passed the kitchen, I stopped for a moment and grabbed a piece of paper and a pen. My hand shook slightly as I wrote, and I cursed the weakness of my own emotions. The note was simple. Nothing dramatic. No sweeping declarations. Just honesty. Something I felt he deserved, even if it wouldn't make any of this easier. "There are things I feel, and things I can't allow. Thank you for seeing me. Please forget that I let myself be seen." The words felt heavier than I thought they would, the weight of them almost too much to bear. I placed the note on the kitchen counter, folded neatly, as if trying to pretend there wasn't anything more to it, as if it could just be forgotten like so many other moments in our lives had been. I lingered in the quiet kitchen, staring at the note for a moment longer. I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince myself that leaving was the right thing to do, or if I was just searching for a reason to stay, but there was nothing left. I couldn't stand in this house any longer. I couldn't stay here, with the memory of last night still pressing down on me, with the weight of Ethan's confession, his words that I could not unhear. The way they had crushed me with their honesty, and with the understanding that I felt the same way too. But I couldn't go there. I couldn't let it unravel. I grabbed my bag and slipped out the door, careful not to make a sound. I didn't want to wake him. Not yet. Not now. As I stepped into my car and started the engine, the gray sky above seemed to match the storm still raging inside me. It felt fitting. The world outside was so still, yet in my chest, everything was chaotic. Torn between what I should have done and what I wanted to do. The echo of Ethan's voice was still in my head, repeating those words over and over. "I think about you more than I should." The words burned in my mind, their heat following me out of the driveway. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The pain of it all, of everything that had been said and left unsaid, was already too much. But as I drove down the winding road, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, like a piece of me had been left behind. Maybe it was the way the world seemed so quiet now. Or maybe it was the fact that I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan standing there last night, his eyes full of things I couldn't name. But even in my haste, I couldn't ignore the way the house, our house, looked behind me. The windows seemed empty now, dark, like everything that had once been inside had been drained away. I could almost feel the weight of his stare on my back, even from the rearview mirror. And then, just as I was about to make the turn out of the neighborhood, I saw him. Ethan. He was standing by the window, staring out at the driveway. He didn't move, didn't wave, just stood there, watching. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. The world seemed to pause, just long enough for me to see him clearly, to see the shadow of what was left between us. The weight of that moment hit me hard, and for just a second, I wondered if I was making the right choice. But I couldn't stay. So I drove. I kept my eyes on the road. I didn't look back. The farther I drove, the more I felt the silence in the car wrap around me like a heavy blanket. But this silence was different. This one wasn't full of tension. It wasn't full of emotions left hanging in the air. This silence was final. It was the kind of silence that comes after a decision has been made, after a door has been closed and locked behind you. And no matter how much I wanted to believe that it didn't matter, that I could walk away from this and pretend it never happened, the truth was undeniable. It had mattered. It had changed everything. As I drove away, the sky began to lighten, the storm finally giving way to the first hints of dawn. The world was still moving. It was still turning. And despite the weight of what had just happened, I had to believe that eventually, things would settle. Eventually, I would find my way back to myself. But Ethan? I didn't know if he would ever find his way back from this. And as much as I tried to convince myself it didn't matter, I knew that part of me would always wonder, what if we hadn't walked away? What if we had given in to what had almost been? A week passed since I left, but it felt like no time at all. Each day blurred together, an endless cycle of uneventful hours, quiet thoughts, and an aching loneliness that I couldn't shake. I told myself it was for the best. I told myself I'd made the right choice by leaving, that there was nothing more to say, nothing more to do, that the distance would give me clarity. The months ahead would help me forget. I had to forget, right? I was almost certain I'd left everything behind, my feelings, my confusion, all of it. After all, what could be left to hold on to? We'd shared one fleeting, intense connection, one that had no place in the world, no place in my life, and yet, I couldn't let it go. I tried to distract myself. I buried myself in my work, in the mundane. I spoke to people. I smiled. I did everything I could to push the memory of Ethan to the back of my mind, even though his face still found its way into my dreams every night, haunting me. And then one evening, just as I was about to call it a night, my phone buzzed. It was a text, a message from Ethan. I froze. My hand hovered over the screen for a moment before I dared to look. The words on the screen were simple, almost too simple to hold the weight of everything they represented. I felt it too. I just didn't know if I was allowed to. The message lingered there, hanging in the air between us, suspended in time. No follow-up, no explanation, no promises, just the raw truth of it. The truth that we had shared something deeper than either of us had been prepared for, and that it wasn't something either of us could just dismiss or forget, no matter how much we tried to convince ourselves otherwise. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity, my heart pounding in my chest. He felt it too. The words echoed in my mind, over and over again, like a gentle, constant reminder of everything that had almost happened, everything that had almost been. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. What could I say? What words could possibly follow that kind of admission? So, I did nothing. I didn't send a single word back. Instead, I just stared at the message until my eyes blurred with the weight of it, the weight of the silence that followed. I felt the temptation to reply, to reach out, to say something, anything that could close the gap between us. But I knew better. I knew that replying would only open old wounds, wounds that neither of us were prepared to deal with. Instead, I saved the message. I didn't delete it, even though I wanted to. I didn't archive it. I just saved it, as though holding on to those words would somehow give me an anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Because in those simple words, I felt it too, there was a truth too complicated to ignore, a truth that neither of us could deny anymore. But there were no promises attached. There were no, "I'll be here for you," or "let's figure this out" sentiments. There was only quiet acceptance. The kind of acceptance that you find in the most painful moments of your life. When you finally acknowledge that things have changed and there's no going back, no matter how much you wish there were. I wondered if Ethan had sent that message out of guilt, or if he had sent it because he felt as lost as I did. Maybe he just needed to know that he wasn't the only one who had felt that strange, aching connection between us. Maybe he just needed to hear himself say it, even if it meant saying it to me. I wanted to believe that he had sent it because he still cared, that maybe after everything there was still hope for us. But deep down, I knew better. The truth was simpler and harder to accept. We had crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed, and no amount of words could erase that. The message was a bittersweet acknowledgement of something we both knew was dangerous. It was the kind of message that leaves you hanging in the air, neither here nor there, neither one thing nor the other. Just a lingering reminder that some feelings don't go away easily, and that even when you think you've moved on, even when you think you've let go, something still pulls at you, tethering you to the past. And that's where it sat, that message, hanging there in the quiet, unanswered, unresolved, but somehow full of everything we both felt. I didn't reply, and I don't think I ever will, because sometimes the hardest part of a story isn't the part where everything falls apart. It's the part where you just stand there, holding the pieces in your hands, not knowing whether to put them back together or let them go. And for now, that's all I can do. Let it go. Let the silence speak louder than words ever could. Some moments aren't meant to be lived out. They're meant to remind us we're still human. And maybe that's the real lesson in all of this. We go through life thinking we have all the answers, pretending we know what's right and wrong, good and bad. But sometimes the hardest truths don't come wrapped in black and white morality. Sometimes they're wrapped in gray areas, moments that shake us and make us question everything we thought we knew about ourselves, about the people we love, and about the choices we make. Looking back, I know I'll never have all the answers. I'll never know if it was wrong to feel what I felt, or if it was the first time in years that someone truly saw me, saw all of me. For a brief moment, Ethan and I shared something that was real, something that was raw and vulnerable, and for a while I thought it could be something more. But the truth is, I'll never know what we could have been. We'll never get that chance. And that thought, that unknown, is what haunts me. I think we all have moments like that, don't we? Moments where we reach out for something that feels right, only to have it slip through our fingers before we can truly grasp it. The regret comes later, the wondering of what might have been. The wondering if, just maybe, we were on the verge of something we'd never experience again. A connection that could have changed everything. A love that could have felt different. But sometimes the hardest part isn't losing that connection. It's the knowing that you can never go back. You can't change what happened, and you can't undo those moments of silence, those moments of longing, or those fleeting exchanges that left you feeling both fulfilled and empty at the same time. And so, you let go. You move on. You let the quiet take over. But in the back of your mind, there's always that question. That question you'll never have an answer to. Was it wrong to feel what I felt? Or was it just human? Was it just the need to be seen, to be understood, that made me vulnerable enough to even consider what we almost did? The truth is, I don't know. But what I do know is this. The human heart isn't something you can control, no matter how much you try. It feels what it feels, and sometimes the things it feels don't make any sense. Sometimes those feelings come at the wrong time, in the wrong place, and they create confusion and chaos that's hard to sort through. But that doesn't make them any less real. It's funny though. In all of this, I've learned that it's not the big moments that change us. It's the quiet ones. The moments when no one is watching. The moments when we're alone with ourselves and our emotions, and we finally admit what we've been too scared to acknowledge. What Ethan and I shared wasn't just about attraction. It wasn't about physical desire or fleeting moments of weakness. It was about connection. A deep, human connection. A desire to be seen in a way that no one else ever had. And I think that's why it hurts so much to let it go. Because it wasn't just a mistake, it was something real. Something that didn't have a place in our world, but that existed anyway. And so, we part ways. He goes on with his life, and I go on with mine. We both carry the weight of what happened, but we also carry the understanding that some connections are just meant to exist in that fleeting moment, never to be fully realized, but always to be remembered. I'll never forget him. And I'll never forget how it felt to truly be seen, to truly feel something, even if it wasn't meant to last. And maybe that's the gift we're left with, those moments that stay with us long after the story has ended. The moments that remind us we're still human, that we're still capable of feeling deeply, of loving in ways we never thought possible. I'll always remember what we almost were. But what about you? What do you think? Was it connection? Was it confusion? Or was it something else entirely? If you're still here, and this story made you feel something, anything, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know what this story stirred in you. Was it an understanding you never had before? Was it a reminder that we're all just looking for that kind of connection? Or was it something else? And if you want more stories like this, the kind that make you think, the kind that make you feel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Join us here at Mr. Alex Stories, where we tell the stories that others won't. The ones that leave you questioning, the ones that speak to that quiet place inside all of us. See you in the next video.